Okay, let me introduce our next guest.
Can you hear me?
I can, Stephanie. I'm going to introduce you now.
Okay.
Our next guest is Stephanie Bailey, and her talk is called The Empowerment of Self-Love. I wanted to end today on self-love before we did our survivor panel discussion. Stephanie is a certified master life coach, the CEO of Miss Adventures LLC, and three-time #1 best-selling author. Stephanie's mission is empowering women on all aspects of love. Stephanie has been mentoring women for over 26 plus years and offers in-person and virtual sessions. Thank you, Stephanie, for being here with us today.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. And I'm very passionate about self-love. As you know, it's something that I truly believe is the key when it comes to past trauma. Sharing my story, and I say story because I truly believe there's a difference between a story that then defines your life and a story that you're sharing to help empower other people, women, for instance, that's my target market, to empower other women so that they know that they're not in a situation alone. So going from that, my story is very interesting from the time that I was conceived. So a little bit about my background. I am adopted. I was adopted at the age of 2.5. I was conceived of rape. Through my journey before I was actually adopted at 2.5, I was in several different foster homes. And in those several foster homes, I was molested. I think it was 3 different foster homes, 3 or 4 different foster homes I was molested in before I was even adopted. So when my parents adopted me, I was with my brother Charles, who is not my biological brother, but was very attached to me and very protective of me, and vice versa. So even though I don't know if he exactly remembers what happened to me, because I don't, there is a part that I feel like energetically he knew and was very protective of me. Through my life, I was a very kind of wild child, very hard to understand because I did not understand what had happened to me in my own personal journey. I just knew this sense of just not feeling valued. And it wasn't my parents that adopted me, it was just this feeling I had from all the experiences I had dealt with. And then carrying on my journey, I unfortunately lost my father to an unexpected heart attack. This is my father who raised me at the age of 20. And he was my best friend. And my hope and dream was that if I was to ever get married, he'd walk me down the aisle. He was a reverend, and then he would turn around and marry me. So when he died, that just really enhanced my abandonment issues. It escalated it. And through that escalation, I then turned to drinking a ton. I was doing drugs. I was in toxic relationships after relationships. And I was also engaging in toxic friendships. And through all of that, even before that, I was also sexually molested, or sexually assaulted, I should say, in college. So there's a lot of things that happen in my life that, again, is my story, but not what defines me. And through this, I have realized that self-love has been the key. And I didn't realize that until later on in life. And the interesting thing is, I have a photo of me. I don't have many photos. The photo of me is when I was 2.5. I have no baby photos prior to 2.5 years old, is a photo of me hugging myself. And I remember framing this photo, I think 30 years ago, in this frame that says deja vu. And the interesting thing about this photo is that it was sitting in front of me, reminding me that self-love is always the key. And the importance of why self-love is the key is because when you gain self-love, the tools to really love yourself, and I'm not talking about the car you drive, the clothes you wear, how many friends you have, where you live, any of that type of stuff, the money you make, that's not the self-love I'm talking about. That's superficial. The self-love that I'm referring to is that inner deep love where you can say, I love myself unconditionally, regardless of what I've gone through. I am not damaged. I deserve to be loved. I deserve to have somebody love me, support me, respect me. And I am going to be very vocal about what I want and not be afraid. And when we're able to have that unconditional self love for ourselves, then we're also able to forgive ourselves as well as others who have hurt us. So, through this process of self love and coaching women on self love, as well as all aspects of love, I have experienced in my own life where I've been able to forgive the men who molested me. I have been able to forgive my father who raped my mother, and they weren't even dating at the time. He had a crush on her. He was in love with her. Did not see him in that light, and she lost her virginity through rape. And so I was able to forgive that situation. She had already done that. It was a little bit harder for me to have given that forgiveness at first, but through giving that forgiveness, I let go of the power I was giving to other people. Because when we're not able to forgive and we don't recognize this, then we're actually giving people our power. That person that you're not forgiving, they're moving on with their life. They're fine. They're not even probably thinking twice about what they did to you or the trauma that they caused in your life or any of the experiences that they might have been a part of. And so I really encourage women to forgive. And when you forgive, it doesn't mean you forget, right? That doesn't mean you let that person back in your life. And I teach this. I'm also a best-selling author. I teach this in a lot of my writings and things like that, that when you forgive, you can do it in a letter. You can write a letter, you can burn it, you can write a letter, you can send it. If you're in a safe place, it would not say if somebody has raped or molested or was abusive in your relationship to send them a letter so then they know how to find you. But there's ways to release it out of your body so that you can move on in a healthy way. And so I truly believe that self-love is the key when it comes to any past trauma that we have experienced so that we can take on our lives and say, you know what, I am as deserving as anybody else when it comes to love, happiness, success, abundance, all of that stuff. And that's what I have.
What? Are you trying to help me get caught up here?
Yes. Yes, I am. I mean, I will end with this, like loving yourself is the most rewarding gift that you can give to yourself because unconditional love for yourself can never be taken away, no matter what somebody says. And that's the biggest lesson I've learned because I have dated a lot of men before I found my partner. And that's the best thing. It's like somebody can say something to you, and when you really love yourself, it's like it just goes in and it goes out. And that's the best way I can describe it because you know yourself inside and out. And it's almost like your superpower where you're like, you know what? Thanks for sharing, but I know me and I know what I deserve and I know that I'm a good person and I know that you can have your thoughts and opinions, but those are your thoughts and opinions.
As Heidi says in the chat, amen on that.
Thank you.
Um, it was great what you said about the picture of yourself, hiding yourself at a young age, because
Yeah.
Heidi and I do a trauma grief group at our church, and one of the self-compassion techniques that Heidi super loves is the hug. And it's something I've taught my children from a very young age is when feel scared or lonely or you wish you had your mom with you, hug yourself. And there's many of us in this here right now that didn't have moms that could do that for us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so important to be able to give yourself that hug.
I
So that was
believe
what.
I believe honestly that you should hug yourself in the morning because, when I was little, I didn't have that. I wasn't rocked as a child because I wasn't adopted until 2.5. And so I would rock myself to go to sleep. So I'd be in my bed rocking myself, which, now I'm like, well, that's probably great exercise. But at first, I think it was sort of, confusing to my parents of why I was doing that. And then my mom realized, like, oh my gosh, she was never rocked as an infant. And so it was a way of soothing myself to get to sleep. And eventually I'd fall asleep. But then when I was getting in relationships, there would be men that were like, why is she like rocking her? Like, what is going on right now, like with her? And when I finally got into a comfortable place of really finding that self love, the rocking stopped. However, I still like to wake up, hug myself, and have that positive affirmation. I wrote a book called Love Affirmations Manifesting the Life You Desire. And I wrote that during this time. I've been really dealing with health issues, as you know, since March. And when I was meditating and praying about what I should write, it was just like, here it is. God was like, this is, you've already written this. This is you give affirmations to your loved clients, you give them to yourself. The book is already here. You say them in the mornings. And that's another thing too. It's like yourself, say that positive affirmation because that's your shield, that's your guard, and that's your support and empowerment for your self-love.
Yes. Okay, I want to mention a couple other people too.
Yeah,
Okay, so not everybody here knows about the medical struggles. I would love for you to share, but of course you don't have to.
I can
But
share.
I wanted to point out that we had another talk earlier. Dana, her traumas impacted her medical health pretty significantly. And I'm not saying that's what yours is about, but I don't think it's a coincidence that you were adopted and you had trauma and the struggle because of that mind body spirit connection. So I'm hoping you and Dana connect. And there was somebody else. I'll come back to it. Okay. Oh yeah. Do you want to talk about health or not so
Yeah,
much?
I'm totally fine talking about my health. So, one of the things I did go through is constellation therapy, but we'll get back to that. So, back in March, I started to feel very, very sick. Again, advocating for yourself is so important in this world, and we don't do it enough. And so in March, I was throwing up constantly. I could not keep food down. I didn't know what was going on. It first started with alcohol. I was getting nauseous, and I'm not a big drinker. That was kind of alarming that I was getting very nauseous after I had like a sip of wine. And then it progressed to food. And this happened March of 2023. And it kept progressing. And I would go to Kaiser and I kept saying, okay, what's wrong? They would give me blood tests. And every test, of course, was you're normal, you're in the normal range. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But I normally weigh 118, between 115, 118. I'm coming to you, I weigh 108. And every time I came, I was weighing less and less. So now we're furthering. It was in October. My friend is a doctor. Actually, I spoke to her in September. And she was just like, okay, something's definitely wrong. I've known you since you were 5. You need to come to Texas and let's figure this out. She had some ideas of what was going on. And by the way, when I went to her, I looked malnutritioned, I looked gray, and I was 103 pounds. And so through a method called chelation, chelation is where, and I can't tell you exactly what's in it because I don't really know, but it basically pulls out any heavy metals out of your body. We all have heavy metals, but it gives a range of like, okay, you have, the regular amount, you have a high amount. Mine was at a high toxicity amount that my body was literally shutting down. And because her center, her name is Dr. Brandon, she owns Opus in Texas. She is a firm believer that it's not just about, oh, here is something wrong with you. It's also about testing, your blood, what's going on in your life. And so I went through a thing called constellation therapy with this gentleman. He's amazing. And he talks to you about your past traumas and experiences, and then you are in a room with other people that have either done this type of therapy or they're familiar with it or they're new to it. And so you're in this room with these people, and it was mostly women, and everybody closes their eyes and he shows you the piece of paper after talking to you about what he feels could be contributing to what you're still hanging on to. And for me, it was still my mother and my father and me being conceived through rape. And so I would come up and I would touch somebody. So Karen, just say I was touching you. You wouldn't even know who you were. And just say I was touching you as I was bringing the energy of my biological mom into you. And then I would fill the room and I'd touch somebody else and bring the energy of my biological father. And then I'd touch somebody else and bring the energy of me. And then I'd walk away and step next to him. And the doctor was just like, okay, I want you all to open your eyes. Now, the people that were touched, I want you to stand up and start moving around near each other and then express what you're feeling. And it was the most powerful thing because as my biological mother and my biological father got close to each other, my biological mother was like, I don't feel comfortable. I feel tension. I feel this. And everything she was describing was exactly what she was feeling. And she passed away 2 years ago in December, unfortunately, but that's what she was feeling. And then the person that was me was like running around at first, like, oh, I'm fine, I'm fine. And then the doctor was like, I want you to sit down in a fetal position. How do you feel? And then she started saying, I feel a little unsafe. I feel uncomfortable. And then the words that she was describing me, I was just tearing up because it was exactly what I was feeling that I didn't realize I was hanging on to. Because the thing about self-love and our journey to self-love is it's forever going, right? We don't master it overnight. We don't master in a couple months. We don't ever really master it. It's something that we're constantly working on. And it's a journey that is the most rewarding journey that we'll ever have. And it is a journey that can be very difficult and painful at times. But it is, like I said, I mean, I love loving myself. And I love that constantly I'm being tested to see how much I love myself and putting through these tests that I'm like, that's life. Life is about being tested and about seeing the rewards afterwards. So through both of those experiences and helping to let that go and also realizing that I have these high heavy metal toxins in my body, there has become a balance in my life. And so through that, I'm still working on getting those, high toxic heavy metals out of my body. I'm still working on that forgiveness piece, which I did when I was there. That I didn't really, and the other thing I also want to share, Karen, is a lot of times when we're hanging on to disappointment, anger, things like that, it's not even the person that has harmed us, it's the ancestry part of it. So it's the ancestry part of like my grandmother, because somebody stood up in that group that I didn't even touch, that ended up being my grandmother and like standing behind my biological father in this way, but not really protecting because she never really protected him. And it was this trauma of like, what she had done to him because of what was done to her, that then he passed on to my biological mother in that abusiveness of creating me. And then the same thing with Colleen, she had dealt with a lot in her family. And so it's really not just forgiving the two people that were involved, but really forgiving the ancestors that have created this pattern so that we ourselves can break that pattern and not bring it into our lives and potentially our children's lives.
Beautiful. So the other people I think maybe resonate a little bit with what you're saying is Lane. I'm going to put her story out there, but you guys had a couple of medical things. And Nadia, who is talking tomorrow, is going to be talking about home within, so that self-love journey. So that's something to look forward to tomorrow. And then Dr. Pine earlier was talking about the impact of child sex abuse along the lifespan too, that ACEs study, you talked about several things. I bet, have you ever taken the ACE test, Stephanie?
I have not.
Okay, it stands for Adversive Childhood Experiences. And it's a test of 10 items.
Okay.
And you mentioned several of them, like drug and alcohol abuse is one of them. Dr. Pine, did you want to comment?
I was just going to say it's the 10 questions can be easily found, Stephanie, and if you don't find them, feel free to email me at
Okay.
Pamela P at ivatcenters.org. But it's a really interesting thing for people with a trauma background to do. You have to brace yourself, though, honestly, a little bit, because there's, you know, if a person has a 1A score, which means that there's one type of trauma in their background, highly likely that they have another.
Yes.
And it's highly likely also that people who are coming out of trauma backgrounds might have more than a few.
Oh,
And I don't, the only thing that makes me nervous, I think people should take it because it gives them an idea of what they themselves are dealing with and the kind of stress that has come to their body and their brain and, and all that. But I also just don't want people to get, kind of whacked out that, oh my God, I've got a face score. Does that mean this or that mean that? It
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean anything
right.
except that there has been trauma in your background and that healing modalities that you're obviously using are really important to use. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Last 2 years ago, I had a book release party, and again, it was like very close. It was like 10 days after I had found out that my biological mother had passed away. And so I remember I was at this cupcake store and the cups were not done right. They were big. They're supposed to be tiny because we had a small dessert table that we were doing. And I just remember just like having this breakdown in front of in front of my favorite cupcake shop. And I'm so aware of my body and I'm so aware of myself. And I knew that my abandonment triggers were being like lit up, even though she didn't leave me, she died. And she died before she was only 69. She had me when she was 17. But it was one of those things where I could feel it coming up. And I remember holding my heart space. And it's something that I taught in my two books. I've written several books. One that is Misadventure's Guide to Ultimate Empowerment for Women. Harness your power and thrive in every area of your life. It's a book collaboration. And I remember holding my heart space and saying, I'm okay. I'm okay. Everything will be okay. And the
Right.
second I said that, my abandonment was not becoming the driver's seat of my life. And
Right.
I teach women a lot is it's not about ignoring our trauma. It's not about pushing it under a rug. It's not about getting over it. It's about saying when it comes up, I'm not going to let it have the power over me. And I know that I can have control over it by saying I recognize it, it's there, but it doesn't have to take over right now because I love myself. And that is the biggest gift. I'm
Thank you.
liking you
Oh,
right
I
now, by
love
the way.
that.
I love your energy.
Yeah, and I just want to make one more comment about the ACE study before we go to the questions and comments and then to the survivor panel. Dr. Pamela was right on the money about take the results with a grain of salt because it doesn't measure the intensity of the trauma or the frequency. Okay. I scored a 10 out of 10, and I learned that at a conference that I went to as a therapist, as a professional. And it really shocked me and wounded me during that, and it impacted my experience there. So thank you, Dana, for putting it in the chat. For those of you who haven't taken it, just be mindful of when you take it. Think about doing it with your therapist or someone you trust. Make sure you have some support built in. Because if you haven't taken it before, it can be a little shocking. But also, please keep in mind, it doesn't consider everything. There's a lot of traumas that aren't even listed.
Yeah, I'll just add to one more thing, Karen. It doesn't measure the number, it doesn't measure the intensity, but it also doesn't measure uh, the resilience factor. Who are you as a person? And what is your capability of moving through? There are some kids that would be slam down dunk, that's it. And there are others who have both an inner, resilience as well as supports that help them move through difficult situations. So it's not as everybody's saying, it's not set in stone. There are a lot of factors as to how one person would respond to their situation. But they should have never done that, Karen. To lay that on somebody and then have no, follow up. I mean, it's a pretty heavy duty thing to do to somebody.
Well, maybe it sparked me to start summits. Who knows?
There you go. There you go. That's the way. That's a wonderful way to look at it.
Yeah. Okay, so I want us to take a couple questions for Stephanie. So if you have questions, please put your hand up digitally or physically, or put it in the chat. And while we're waiting for that, I'm going to read the comments. And Leslie, did you want to read your comment or would you like me to? I don't want to take your voice away. I'm trying to give people voices whenever possible. And for you, physically, literally too. And she may not be able to come off too. Okay, she wants me to go ahead. Okay. So Elaine is also a survivor of CSA, child sexual abuse. She has had a thyroid tumor and removal, Crohn's, epilepsy, heavy metals, Lyme. Her health started going downhill at 19 and is continually harder to slow down that snowball despite her consistent work. Her trauma started very young, and she knows it makes sense how it's connected, but it's frustrating to have this ongoing legacy. And I think Dana had a comment too that this is familiar. She resonates with what you're saying, Stephanie, as well. Michelle said this is a powerful talk. Heidi is my self-compassion friend. We're writing actually a book together, and she says she loves this topic. Any questions for
Can I comment
Stephanie?
on?
Yes.
Okay, so I had one of my love clients. She, when she was coming to me, she had a very, 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 like, I'm talking about bad cough, to where she thought maybe she'd answer. I mean, it was just so to the point of just there. And, if you follow chakras, your chakra is your voice. Like, this is blue, it's your voice. And so we really worked on what was she not speaking her truth on. And she was like, oh, I'm speaking my truth on everything. I said, but there's something you're not speaking your truth on. And as we delve deeper into her past, her life, her trauma, and as we talked about what was coming up for her, one of the things that I'm very passionate about is writing a letter, like we talked about. But what I didn't get into detail is that the first letter I talk to my clients about is writing a letter as if nobody's going to see it. Meaning you can swear, who cares about the punctuation, get it out, whatever you have to say without the buts. So it's not saying, I'm so mad that you hurt me, but I understand that you did the best you could, in case we're talking about a parent. It's releasing the buts and really just getting out exactly what you feel and what you're angry about and all of that other stuff. And then you come back, whether it's, I usually say 3 days, maybe it's a week, you come back and you rewrite the letter of a more forgiving point of view, forgiving that person for what they did. And then the third letter is forgiving yourself. And when we write these letters in that order, it really helps to release. And through her experience, her cough, which was consistent, diminished. And it diminished because she didn't realize she was hanging on to it so bad, even though she said she let go, she forgave, whatever. We don't realize that even when we think we've forgiven, a lot of times our energy, our body is telling us that we're still holding on to it. And we usually know it if somebody asks us a question and we either get defensive, we don't want to talk about it, or just like, I don't know, it's just a feeling of like tense that builds up in our bodies and in our, what we're going through. And Lane, I am so sorry to even hear that you're having health issues. I'm so about empowering women, and just to hear that you're going through that, I can't imagine I'm going through my own, and people can imagine the things I've been going through health-wise, because this is not my first, bout of health or anything like that. And I'm still getting more MRIs getting done, from last week to this week. So I get all of that, and that can bring our emotional state down. So I'm sending you so many prayers and healing energy your way.
Thank you so much for that. Lane is beautiful inside and out like you, so I hope she found that helpful. Okay, I will take one question for Stephanie before we transition to survivor panel. And then the other option is the Facebook page, Heal, Thrive, Dream. Do you have a quick question? The comments were wonderful.